Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Wright, and I'm Managing Director of Reputation and Influence here at ICAEW. It's my genuine honour to welcome you to Chartered Accountants Hall and to this general election small business debate, held in partnership between ICAEW and two of the foremost representatives of the small business community, Enterprise Nation and the Federation of Small Businesses. Enterprise Nation is a small business support platform and membership community and a one-stop shop for startups and small businesses with a mission to support 1 million businesses to thrive. The Federation of Small Businesses represents over 150,000 small businesses and self-employed members in local communities in every nation and region, advocating for change at a local, regional, national and international level. It's a pleasure to see so many people in this hall, but I also want to highlight those participating online, several hundred, I understand, many of whom, like yourselves, run or advise small businesses and who will have spent the day working hard for those businesses and for their customers, and who may well even be going back to work once this event is over. And indeed, as I was alluding to there, many chartered accountants run or advise small businesses, giving them valuable advice to avoid mistakes, stay on track, and have the best chance of success. For the fact of the matter is that the UK economy relies on the success of small businesses. 99% of all businesses are SMEs. 6 out of 10 working people in our country are employed by small businesses, and they generate more than half of the business turnover of our economy. New innovation and ideas pour out of these small enterprises, flowing through the rest of business and making the whole country, as a result, more productive, competitive and prosperous. And yet, as we all know, the last few years with COVID and cost increases has seen life especially tough for small businesses. So with all this promise, all this opportunity and all the challenges that small businesses provide, what will the next Parliament do for them? The Conservatives in their manifesto pledged to deliver a 10-point plan to support SMEs, including business rate support, cuts in national insurance, and taking more companies out of burdensome regulation. The Liberal Democrats promised to boost small businesses and empower them to create new local jobs, including by abolishing business rates and replacing them with a commercial landowner levy to help Britain's high streets. And the Labour Party has developed a plan for small businesses in partnership with small business, pledging to take action on late payments, removing barriers to export for small businesses, and reforming the British Business Bank to make it easier for small companies to gain access to growth capital. No doubt, ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear more of these policies from our politicians, and I encourage you to question and interrogate them. And on that, I'm delighted that we have 3 senior politicians to discuss and debate small business. For the Conservative Party, I'm delighted to introduce Kevin Hollinrake, Minister for Enterprise, Markets and Small Business. From the Liberal Democrats, I'm pleased that we have Sarah Olney, the party spokesperson on business and industrial strategy. And from Labour, I'm also pleased to introduce Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Welcome to all 3 of you. And to steer us through tonight's hustings, I'm really pleased to hand over to our 2 chairs, Emma Jones, co-founder and CEO of Enterprise Nation, and Tina McKenzie, UK Policy Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have an informative and enjoyable evening. I'll then introduce the panel to come up and debate and discuss small businesses. Thank you.
To your pen, Sarah, and Kevin at the end.
Thank you.
Am I in the middle? Have they found the right ones?
Well, good evening, everyone. You're very welcome here tonight. And it's great to see females represented on the stage. I'm sure you'll agree as well. And sometimes some of these debates, we see man after man. It's great to have that representation. Isn't that right, Sarah?
Absolutely.
Cool. So as previously said, I'm Tina McKenzie. I am the chair of the policy chair of the Federation of Small Businesses. We are delighted to be here tonight and delighted to have our questions ready for the three representatives of the party. I'm going to start by just thanking all the small business owners that are in the room, but also the ones that are dialing in. I know we've hundreds of people across the UK dialing in who are very interested in this particular debate because this is a debate that matters to them. Most small business owners will be voting, and a lot of them still haven't made up their mind who they're going to vote for. So this should be a really exciting debate, and we're really looking forward to it. Emma.
Thank you, Tina. I'm Emma Jones, founder of Enterprise Nation. Where's Mr. Ian Wright? I think he introduced me as a co-founder, so I'd love to find out where the other one is. I'd love to find a fellow co-founder. But until that point, delighted to be co-hosting, however, with Tina this evening, this debate. And as Tina just mentioned, this is a critical time in the campaign, and we're hugely grateful that these three very busy politicians have come to give their time because they recognise the importance of the small business vote. So for those who are joined in online, we have hundreds of people who are tuned into the live stream. If you have a question as we go through the discussion, please use slido.com and use the hashtag SBDebate. Indeed, if you're sitting in the live audience, please use the hashtag SBDebate and give us your comments. But before we open up for questions, each of the three panellists are going to give their 1-minute pitch to small businesses. So I'm going to call on the order in which they are. Kevin, Sarah and Johnny, please share with us your 1-minute pitch. Kevin.
Well, thank you, Emma. Winston Churchill said it best when he said that some people see private enterprise as a predatory tiger that needs to be shot. Some people see it as a cow that they can milk. Few people, he said, few people see it for what it really is, and that's a strong horse that pulls the whole cart. We should never forget that. For 30 years prior to politics, I was in business myself, so I'm a little bit biased. For the 9 years I've been in Parliament, virtually the majority of work I did as a backbencher was to support SMEs, and it's been a delight to do so for 18 months as small business minister. I guess the most important thing we can do to help small businesses generally in government is keep out the way and let you get on with it. But there are some areas where we need to help, usually when there's market failure. And over the last few years, we've seen severe market failure, not least through the COVID and cost of living crises, which is why we stepped in with £500 billion of support to help SMEs. It was predicted that 600,000 would go under during that time. That did not happen. But there's another market failure that persists beyond COVID, persists beyond the cost of living, and that's access to finance. It is particularly difficult for SMEs. So most of my work as a small business minister, and whatever happens next, most of my work will be focused on making sure SMEs get access to finance. And that can be in terms of getting paid more quickly, accessing loans. The 10-point plan referred to earlier very much does that. There's two very exciting things I draw your attention to in that plan. Open finance and regional mutual banks could revolutionise the journey for SMEs in terms of access to finance. But whatever decision you make in terms of which party to support, one thing I would say about our party in terms of business would never, ever put the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Sarah.
Thank you very much. Everyone deserves the chance to get on in life, to see their hard work and their aspiration properly rewarded. But that's not been the reality for too many people in the UK today, because this out-of-touch Conservative government has crashed our economy with their reckless policies, saddled families and businesses with unaffordable bills and a record tax burden, and left more than 6 million people stuck on hospital waiting lists. We need a real plan, not just to stop things getting worse, not just to return to business as usual, but to build the economy of the future, an economy that is genuinely innovative, prosperous and fair. That means helping more people into work by getting them off the NHS waiting lists, helping them learn the skills they need and making it easier to juggle work with caring responsibilities. It means backing small businesses, the engines of our economy and the beating heart of local communities to create good jobs in every part of the UK. It means investing in cheap, clean, renewable power to drive a strong economic recovery, bring down energy bills and create secure, well-paid new jobs. It means fixing the UK's broken relationship with Europe, tearing down the Conservatives' damaging barriers to trade. And it means managing the public finances responsibly and giving businesses the certainty and stability that they need to invest in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Johnny.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for our hosts. Thank you for this audience. And may I just say at the beginning, I hope we're going to have a really robust set of exchanges tonight. But I did just want to say, in relation to my two colleagues on the stage, because we have similar briefs, we work in Parliament and various things. These are people who I personally respect a great deal. I think they're in politics for the right reasons. But I hope we can have that good faith argument this evening about what needs to be put right across the UK. And my simple case to you is this, that after 14 years, there is no reasonable or rational case to be made for the continuation of this Conservative government in office. I think at best, the last 14 years have been disappointing, and at worst, they have been genuinely chaotic. And for business owners, for people in business, that has meant life has been hard. Now, I would never blame the government for a pandemic or the Russians invading Ukraine. But I think after 14 years, it is reasonable to hold them to account for the totality of what life has been like. And simply put, we have got a situation today in the UK where tax is high, where services are poor. And the reason for that is how disappointing the economy has performed, how low growth has been, how low business investment has been, and the corresponding effect that has on productivity. And at the heart of the Labour manifesto is an argument that that cannot be something we just silently accept, that we have to do better than that. And the set of proposals that we have put forward in that manifesto are an unapologetic argument that we can do better, that governments don't have to cause you problems, they can actually improve things, whether that is on, first of all, that commitment to stability, to a real industrial strategy, to reform of areas like planning and getting some things built on infrastructure and homes across the UK, on making Brexit work better, on reform of the apprenticeship levy, of the specific policies we put forward for small business on things like late payment and procurement. We believe the only strong outcome for the UK from this general election would be a change of government. And the only party that can be that change is the Labour Party. And we can do that because we have led in the Labour Party an incredible transformation in our own position since the last general election. We've accepted that defeat, moved on and addressed what we need to do differently. And quite simply put, the argument in this election is this. If you want more of the same for the last 14 years, the Conservative Party is your choice. But if you want better and if you want change, that's got to be a vote for the Labour Party. Thank you very much.
Thank you, panellists.
Thank you, Jonathan. As we go through, we're going to try and encourage you not to talk about each other, but just to talk about what your plans are going to be, and try not to talk over each other, and try to be as succinct as possible. This is something we have to do in business every day, so I'm sure you can pull it off. Okay, so we know that you all think a thriving private sector is important. You've heard earlier that 99% of all the enterprises in the UK are small and medium. You know that there's 16 million people employed in this group. But we also know that at its peak, just a few years ago, there were 6 million SMEs in the UK. We are 500,000 enterprises less today. I'm going to start with Sarah. How important is that to you that we grow back that community for the economy?
Well, the obvious answer, Tina, of course, is extremely important because SMEs, for all the reasons you've just mentioned, are very much the lifeblood of our economy. They're not just our current small and medium enterprises, they're our future large enterprises. And that's where we find the innovation and the imagination, the new thinking that's really going to spur us on. We know that systematic economic change is already upon us and needs to be grasped, and we need to move forward with that, with clean energy, with the green economy, with all of the new developments in technology. These need to be grasped, and I think that SMEs are best placed to do that. I think there are two things that the Liberal Democrats are really calling for in this election, which I think can really help to drive that revitalisation of SMEs. The first one is I think we're the only party that's actually proposing a major change in the way that business rates are levied, as Ian mentioned in his opening remarks. We propose to change that to what we're calling a commercial landowner levy, and that would be about actually just taxing the landowners for the value of the land. And what that means for those businesses that are operating out of businesses on that land, firstly, it wouldn't be them that are being charged. The charge would go to the landowner obviously be passed on as a cost of rent, but that's a cost that can be negotiated. It would mean that the charges just on the land and not on plant and machinery, say, that might have been used. So you're not then paying tax on investment that you've made. And finally, it takes away the administrative burden and indeed the liability of business rates from small businesses. So we think that's a step change that could make a real difference for small businesses and really, really help to reduce some of those barriers to entry, particularly for high street firms, which, you know, so many in our communities are really, really noticing their lack of businesses on the high street. And the second thing I would say is we really want to revitalise the skills agenda in the UK. We want to transform the apprenticeship levy, and we hear this from so many businesses over and over again that the apprenticeship levy doesn't work for them. It's just an additional tax, no matter how much time and energy and effort they are spending in training young people in particular. We want to make sure that people can access skills training at every stage in their life. People who entered the employment market in, say, the mid to late 1990s, as I did, are not going to be doing the same jobs even now, never mind in 20 years' time. And so they need to be able to access ongoing skills training throughout their career. So that's a really important thing.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Jonathan, does it matter to your party, 500,000 businesses down?
Of course it does. I mean, we're all going to say it is vital, but I think there's an important element to add to that, Tina, which is that, you know, within the UK, we have a significant and pronounced regional inequality. And I think addressing that requires a focus on smaller businesses. Our pledge is not just to turn around the UK's performance on growth in aggregate, but make sure that benefits all parts of the country. And travelling around the UK, there is, you know, it's a very strong issue how pronounced people feel that inequality within the UK itself is. I think what is necessary around that, well, first of all, I don't worry so much about people creating new businesses. We're an incredibly entrepreneurial country. We see that in every aspect, every sector. But I do worry about, first of all, what is the security of the platform that government offers to build and scale up those businesses on? I think stability is not always the sexiest thing to announce, but I think that is essential as a basis to do that. I think access to finance, our plans are to use the British Business Bank. I think you should always be trying to use existing institutions rather than invent new ones in elections to try and deliver that, and some specific policies we've got in our manifesto, not just on making that available on a regional basis, but actually on making sure there's a fair share of access to finance from more diverse entrepreneurial backgrounds as well, whether that's women or ethnic minorities, making sure there's a level playing field for all. I think on, you know, fundamentally what we need to see more of on the trade side is a focus on assisting SMEs with exporting. A lot of the conversation after Brexit's been about the bigger trade deals, whereas actually the infrastructure we've got in place, we've worked, of course, with the FSB.
And just on that point, I'm just going to bring Kevin in. Exporting is a nice place to, I mean, I'm sure you've seen recently our latest survey shows that 22% of people are less likely to export now due to the restrictions and the problems we've got, the costs of bureaucracy. So how do we create 500,000 more businesses and get back to the vitality we had in the economy?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, you know, Brexit was a vote for change, and it's changed things at the border. It's hit SMEs particularly hard, particularly those in the food sector. And we want to try and ease those burdens. There's no perfect solution to that, and there's a party on the other side of the negotiation table. So we can't get everything we need, haven't been able to get everything we need so far, although we're making progress. Of course, 500,000 businesses matter. Of course they do. And it's been a terribly tough time for business over the last few years. That's why we've stepped into the degree we did, £500 billion of support. I must say, when you look at compulsory liquidations, which tends to be the biggest indicator of failure in businesses, if you average it over the COVID period and to today, your average levels, you're not seeing a significant spike. So, but it's the areas we've got to focus on, where we've got market failure, as I saw before, and make sure we have a fair and level playing field. That's what we should be doing. We can't engineer the whole economy. The free market does that. It's the best engineer, best way to drive prices down and service up for our consumers, which is what we should focus on. And that's why our plan, a 10-point plan, tries to address that. It looks at rates, it rebalances the imbalance between online distribution businesses like Amazon and others, and high street businesses. That's a commitment we've got. It looks at the things like the VAT threshold, which is an important thing to you, yeah. Tina, and we've discussed before, how we smooth, let people go through that. It's not just the number of businesses, it's the ones that go to scale up. Johnny's right. We have a proud record for startups in the UK. We're second in the OECD, but we're seventh for scale-ups. So that should be our area of focus. Many other things, access to finance I mentioned earlier, that could be a topic in its own right. That's the most critical element of it. Not just the provision of finance, not the supply, just the supply side, but the demand side. 80% of small businesses would rather grow more slowly than borrow. That's one of your statistics. Yeah. So we want to rebuild the trust between businesses and lenders. And we can do that through the open banking framework, which will revolutionise the journey. So you'll be able to shop around for finance much more easily. It builds on the successes of open banking, something we delivered, and regional mutual banks. A proper relationship manager, once again. They have them in every other G7 country, not in the UK. It's a vital piece of the finance ecosystem that's missing. These things are all in that clear 10-point plan.
Thanks, Kevin.
So Kevin mentions access to finance. I know for a lot of small businesses, you would love more finance from paying less tax. So hands up of small business owners in this room who are nervous about business taxes going up. Okay, we are in the home of ICAEW. We should be talking about tax. So my question to each of my parties is the main business taxes. So I'd love for you to tell me whether you're going to raise them, reduce them, or scrap them for national insurance, corporation tax, and capital gains tax. Jonathan, do you want to start?
Thank you very much, Emma. So we have been very clear in terms of our plans for tax. There are revenue raises within the Labour manifesto, but they're all hypothecated for particular functions. So where we would raise revenue is, for instance, on not having a big loophole in the change to the non-dom tax regime that has hypothecated for the NHS. We would change the treatment of performance-related pay for the private equity industry, which would be income, not capital gains. We've obviously got the policy on VAT on private school fees, but they're all pragmatic ways to raise the revenue for an immediate injection of funding into public services. We have said on income tax and national insurance and VAT, we would not be seeking to raise them. We have said, again, there's nothing else in the Labour manifesto that requires that revenue, that taxation to be raised on households or businesses.
And just to follow up on a couple of points of detail. So VAT, Liberal Democrats have said they would take the threshold to 150,000, Conservative ambition to take it to 90,000. Jonathan, the Labour vision for the rate of VAT at which point the threshold comes is?
Look, this comes up a lot because obviously the impact of inflation and what that has meant for smaller businesses. The thing I would like to see delivered in the longer term is to remove the cliff edge from the threshold. We obviously are an outlier in terms of how high that threshold is compared to lots of places. I think if you simply move that up and the cliff edge is still there, you still get the bunching effect of businesses not seeking to grow past that. Now, it's very complicated to do that in a way which doesn't put an incredible amount of bureaucracy onto smaller businesses. So we've not made a specific pledge to increase that to the level, for instance, that's in the Liberal Democrat manifesto. I think the long term has to be one that works with businesses to remove the cliff edge rather than just raise it higher. And
forgive me on another point of detail, capital gains tax.
No plans to raise capital gains tax in the Labour manifesto.
Okay. Sarah?
I might have to correct you on one point. I don't think we've put in our manifesto about raising the VAT threshold to 150,000.
Is that an announcement tonight, or is that?
No, I'm telling you, it's not.
Getting excited.
It's currently it's currently at 90,000. Obviously, just been increased from 85,000. We're currently proposing to leave it there, but we would really want to be doing a full review. Because obviously this issue, it's very, very clear in the data that businesses are growing to a certain amount. And really, I don't even think, personally speaking, that 90,000 is, in terms of if you're a sole trader, 90,000 might be a kind of like the amount of revenue that you're happy to make just to kind of keep you and your family going. But I don't think even at that level, it's really quite high enough. But we would definitely want to be reviewing that, and not just reviewing the current level, but reviewing the mechanisms that place the levels where they are, because there needs to be a better mechanism for reviewing it over time. Corporation tax, excuse me, there's been so much chaos and uncertainty over corporation tax during the last few years. Originally, the plan was to cut it to 17%. Then the Tories cancelled that cut and said they'd keep it at 19%. Then they said they'd raise it to 25%. Then they said they'd cancel that rise, keep it at 19%. Then they U-turned again and raised it to 25% after all. So we're actually proposing at this stage to keep it at 25% because, above all, we think business needs that certainty and that stability. But obviously, within that 25% main rate, there are a range of investment allowances. And again, that's something we would want to keep under review, particularly for small businesses. On CGT, I just want to talk about that because I think we have made a major announcement on CGT. What we want to do, and this is mostly talking about individuals paying CGT, we want to bring in again the indexation, the inflation allowance. And I think that's particularly important at this point because inflation has been so high over the last few years that a lot of the capital gains people are seeing will have been inflated due to, just due to the inflation rate. So we're proposing to bring back the inflation allowance so that you strip that out from your capital gains and then you're only paying tax just on the actual gain. But alongside that, we are proposing to match up the rates to income tax payable on earnings. But as I say, the inflation allowance is the coming back as well. But as far as how that impacts small business, we want to make sure that business people are protected from the impact of CGT on the businesses that they have founded, that they have grown. And so there would be a very extensive consultation before making any change to CGT for small businesses.
Thank you. Kevin?
National insurance for self-employed, reduced, abolished the national insurance, the main rate of national insurance, which currently it was 9%, it went down to 6%, abolished by 2029, £1,500 for your typical self-employed person, a tax cut. Corporation tax, keep where it is. There's a 19% small profits rate that would stay in place as it is today. Capital gains tax, stay where it is. I've got to say, I know there are lots of conversations around this about taxing capital gains at the same level as income. I think it would be devastating for investment in the UK. You're in an internationally competitive marketplace. You would drive investment abroad. The other thing we'll keep in place is full expensing, which is the most generous capital allowance in the world, in the developed world, in terms of businesses being able to invest and get tax relief on that investment, which should drive business investment, which one of the things that's been holding the economy back since 2016, and for obvious reasons on that. The other things we're retaining, again in the 10-point plan, which are really important, are the tax breaks, such as SEIS, EIS, venture capital trust, business asset disposal relief, business property relief, agricultural property relief. Really fundamentally important that people have the confidence to invest in those kind of really important tax breaks, which are vital for small businesses, the ones that really want to scale up. Those kind of incentives are retained.
Thank you.
Okay, two really quick questions. Of course, small businesses pay a lot of tax. National insurance, business rates, corporation tax, capital gains tax, dividend tax, and the list goes on. They might decide to take their money and maybe put in a tax-free ISA, like some people around the place do, or indeed just build a home extension. We want to encourage those small businesses to put their money into the economy, to help the employees, to build a better economy, so you've got more money to help the most vulnerable in society. If you keep taxing it, it's going to be a problem. But the quick question is this. For decades, and this question has come from someone out there, for decades, successive governments have promised to put an end to late payments, and that is successive governments. And that's late payments from big business to small business. They haven't done it. What would you do differently? Johnny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely reasonable challenge and a really big policy issue. Specifically, we would legislate to make sure that large companies, public companies, have to publish through their audit committees how quickly they actually pay their smaller suppliers. I'm very loath to put additional burdens onto any business, but I think what we've seen over time here is not just the need for policies which set in place what it should be, but actually provide transparency on what it actually is. And that is the right way to deal with what is at times a very different power relationship between a very large business that might be a key customer and the smaller
So you'll
suppliers.
find a way to track it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have full transparency,
Kevin?
legislate to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just tackle the point on tax? One thing I'd like to say, and we're a party of low taxes, but we also want to balance the books, and you've got to get some of that £500 billion back. But a couple of things we should bear in mind. A lot of people say, when I talk to small businesses, what's the government ever done for me? Understandably. But small business rates relief, the fact that 75% of your rates is discounted right now in the hospitality, leisure, retail sectors, and the highest VAT threshold in Europe, we've got small profits rate for corporation tax, and because of the Federation of Small Businesses fantastic campaigning, we've got things like the employment allowance, all are tax breaks for small businesses. So we do look at this as a different cohort.
So how do we get those big businesses to pay those?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. £32 billion. It's another access to finance element of that. So we're already legislating for this, and key part of that is giving the Small Business Commissioner more powers to investigate anonymous information about slow payment, and also a new, completely reworked prompt payment code with different thresholds, different levels of members, gold, silver and bronze, but in the SME category and the larger companies. League tables, so we can really name and shame companies who don't do the job right. And you can look at this now on an organisation we support called Good Business Pays, fantastic organisation, see some of the payment times on some of those companies, how horrendous, 120 days and above. All government contracts, if you're in receipt of a government contract of more than £5 million, you have to prove you pay all your invoices within 55 days right now.
It's a great thing. Is there a reason why you haven't done it yet? Because it's been a problem for us for a long time.
Well, we've obviously announced the outcome of the prompt payment cash flow and permanent cash flow review, and the legislation to do this comes on the back of that. In terms of the government contract, that's something we've already doing. Okay. So that's 55 days. You've got to prove it today. Within a year, you've got to prove you're paying your small businesses within 40 days, and within 2 years, you've got to prove you're paying them within 30 days. To change the culture around this, there's been a big sea change on this. You'll acknowledge this. It's gone from average of 81 days being small businesses paid in 2010 to 56 days today. So we've made progress, but we need to make more.
Thank you, Kevin. Sarah, just in terms of time, I'm going to move to the next question for you. We know that a lot of small businesses are still recovering from the financial crisis of 2008. And what we see now, some of the behaviours with the banks are that they're asking these small businesses for personal guarantees with every application for any sort of finance. Now, a lot of people, as you know, don't have the money to own their own home these days. They're renting. What can we do around that constant request for personal guarantees, which can put people off investing in a business?
I'm sorry I didn't ask you the last question in the end.
But don't worry, it'll come round.
I know. But I did want to say, because I've worked as an accountant in a small business, I have been that person who's been frantically ringing the customers to get the cash in just before payday. So I really, really do understand that issue. But I did on the personal guarantees, that's something that we would really want to be working both with the banking sector and the FCA to find ways to reduce the use of unnecessary personal guarantees, and not least. And Tina, you and I have had this conversation before, because it does discriminate against certain groups. Women, for example, are less likely to have the kind of personal wealth or the personal assets that will enable them to set up a business and grow. People from ethnic minority backgrounds, and I co-chair the APPG for ethnic minority business people in the House of Commons, because I've seen how much harder it is for people from ethnic minority backgrounds to get access to finance, and that's an inequality that simply shouldn't exist. So there are real structural problems there. And as I say, our commitment is to be working with the banking sector and the FCA. And I think specifically reducing the use of personal guarantees could really open up access to finance. And as I say, particularly for previously excluded groups.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject where I think for anyone who's on the political side of it, you frequently have a situation where the banks will always tell you there's more supply than demand, and businesses tell you a completely different story. And I know, talking to a lot of businesses around the country, they would broadly say the only way to get that finance is to prove you don't need it, and then that's the only time you will get the opportunity to do it. Look, I completely agree. I think that the personal guarantee side of it limits our economic potential. I think it produces that inequality we talked about before. Again, I don't want to invent new things, new layers to do it, but I think through some of the existing institutions we've got, whether it's the FCA or principally the British Business Bank, and what we believe can be done, both on the collection of data as to where that finance is going, which is pretty stark on some underrepresented groups, right. And then on the access of those funds themselves in terms of the regulatory changes already underway. That's the best way to address it.
And I'm going to move to Emma, but the access to finance is particularly hitting the minorities, the regions, and women-owned businesses as well. Yeah. Emma.
Lovely segue, Tina. We're only over half the way through, so I'd love to talk about business support. So business support in England, this is a very England specific, forgive me anyone who's dialing in from elsewhere, has been funded by Shared Prosperity Fund. So I'd love the panellists to share what is your future vision for business support. It's been delivered by growth hubs, local enterprise partnerships, but they're being disbanded. So what does it look like and how will you fund it? Kevin, I'll start with you because I read and listened with interest that I think you've said you'll commit to shared prosperity funding for 3 years, but then that money might go to national service. So it'd be great to hear more on that.
Sure. I mean, in terms of the business support element, there are three buckets we try and fill in the Department of Business and Trade. Access to finance is one, which I obviously mentioned quite frequently already. Support and advice is the other one, and removing barriers, the third one. So support and advice, we took the difficult decision to get rid of local enterprise partnerships, but they've been subsumed back into local authorities in the main across the country, and most of the expertise within those, and in our view, they did a fantastic job now within the growth hubs and with the local authorities. So that kind of support is still there. It is the first port of call for businesses who are looking for finance, looking for grants, as grants are available too for businesses. That's a place to go. So we want to make sure there are regional bases, those growth hubs, where people can go into those kind of places. The other areas of business support.
Just to check on that,
yeah.
Have you committed to growth hubs? So if Conservatives...
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Going forward. In terms of business support, we have some other excellent programmes as well. Help to Grow Management, which is a scheme 90% funded by the government, which you know very well, Emma. 90%, it's like a mini MBA, 12-week course, a fantastic course, rave reviews by the people who go on it, by the alumni. We've also just added to, there is a cost involved to that and a time commitment, but we just added to it Help to Grow Management Essentials, which is completely free, which anybody can sign up for. It's like 2 hours of bite-sized learning for SMEs, for those businesses going on those first journey. Helps to Grow Management Essentials. So we still see the areas of business support being very important. There will still be funding for things, of course, in terms of things like going green. There are schemes available today in terms of businesses who are moving in that direction. We want to make sure that that kind of funding continues, and we're committed to making sure that transition to a greener economy benefits SMEs just as it benefits bigger businesses.
Thank you. Sarah, Lib Dem's commitment to growth hub shared prosperity funding.
That's right. I mean, one of our big commitments as far as our business manifesto is concerned is that we really want to bring back the idea of an industrial strategy, to bring together all government policy and to make sure that its spending is focused on, a real sense of priorities. And it could create a purpose-driven partnership between government and business with the aim of tackling the great economic and societal challenges of our time. And we very much see locally funded local enterprise partnerships as being very much part of that, integrated within the industrial strategy, very much something that we want to continue. For me, I think part of the value of a local enterprise partnership is the role it can play in really developing skills where there are regionally based, particular sectors of the economy, to really make sure that our young people are being encouraged to develop the skills that those particular economic sectors will need. So local economic partnerships, absolutely part of our plan within our overall plan for an industrial strategy. For us, part of that funding is going to come from our green investment programme, to which we're committing 8.4 billion in our manifesto. And that's, the green investment programme is very much about investing in our local communities, regional growth, and that would be part of our industrial strategy and very much delivered through local enterprise partnerships.
Thank you. Johnny.
Yeah, we will keep and renew the Shared Prosperity Fund. I'm not convinced it would be better spent on bringing back national service or would cover the cost of that if we were to do that. A big part of our plans is, I actually think, one of the really positive public policy developments in the last few years has been greater devolution. And we see that as absolutely consistent with a national industrial strategy. We are very proud of Labour's mayors up and down the country. I find that business likes those structures. It likes the convening power of a mayor, and it likes the economic geography that is covered by that. And I think that's the best way to tailor local business support to those economic conditions. And I think it's entirely consistent because the role at the national level should be stability and a framework which has national objectives on things like the energy transition or on reform of skills, but that's got to be delivered in a way that works for business. And that element is the right balance between, a national policy framework and local economic leadership to do something like the
Can
measures.
I follow up on that, Johnny? Because there's been a lot of tension in the devolves Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland around the levelling up funds being directed from London. Are you committing that Labour gets the kind of local, that local knows best, therefore in the devolved regions, it will be those devolved governments that will get that money and decide where those projects are? Because of course, in a lot of cases, they're replacing what was EU funds.
Sure. Look, I think when it comes to England, if the conversation is specifically about England, the over-centralisation has been something that has held back economic policy and prosperity. I think the mayors are a really interesting innovation.
How about the UK? I'm talking about UK.
On some of the UK stuff, look, I do feel that what is required sometimes is the fact that the national objectives of the government have to be delivered in a way that is UK-wide. There are some areas we respect devolution. It's a crucial part of the settlement on those devolved areas. But I don't have a problem with policies like the levelling up funds being spent and directed from Westminster if that is the mandate of the government to do that.
Okay, we're going to move on then, Emma, yeah. So if you get elected, what concrete steps will you take to unblock? Often as you go around the towns, and you'll hear this in your constituency, things seem a bit broken. So, you know, things like, for example, the planning system takes too long. We're struggling to get more construction, more homes, better local roads, proper fast broadband to every small business, especially in those rural areas. This is what our members are telling us. So really, what can you do and what are you going to do around the infrastructure around you? And you will be a UK government, so I am talking around the UK, because of course then you will adjust accordingly. So start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's an issue, and the planning system is probably the biggest bottleneck we have in the UK right now. We've got to make sure that we properly resource it, and there's no doubt that as local authority finances have come under pressure, planning departments have been, the economies, false economies, have been made in those areas. So we want to make sure that the planning system works more effectively. Of course, we are putting more money into making sure we're training more planners and we've got more resources for our local authorities to do that. We're also scrapping some rules that have come from the European Union. One of the benefits of Brexit is that there's a rule called nutrient neutrality, which means that when you have a new development, you've got to take into account the nutrients that might be the result from that development. Some of those rules are blocking lots of developments around the country and causing significant delays. So some of these regulatory burdens, as well as resource burdens, that's something in our manifesto we've committed to scrap. But we've done a lot of work trying to make sure that the grid connections, for example, are more readily available in terms of making sure those connections come forward too. But one thing we've got to accept the fact is local planning is a local matter. Local democracy is really important in terms of our democracy, in terms of local decisions. I think if we, on a centralised basis, Johnny was just talking about decentralisation, and that we want to see a more decentralised system. And I must point out, we put in place the devolution to local mayors, Johnny. I'm glad you like that particular policy.
Fair, Kevin, give me something, you know.
But equally, you've got to apply the same in terms of planning. So I do worry about some kind of centrally imposed diktats from a future government that might override what should be planning considerations that have a local context.
And Sarah, on that planning, do you worry about that? A central diktat out across the regions and nations?
Yes, because every context is different, every local authority is different, every local area is different, the economic needs in each area is different, and different things should be prioritised. But I think the problem in our planning system, what really underlies it is a lack of resource, and in particular, and I speak as someone who's married to a planner, we don't have enough people working in our local authority planning teams. Up and down the country. And to go back to your original question, Tina, the Liberal Democrats, our main call in our manifesto is to fix the NHS, because I do think that one of the biggest drags, both on economic activity and in fixing our public sphere, is the number of people who are on NHS waiting lists, the number of people who are waiting for treatment, the number of people who can't live full lives because they're living in pain.
It's really important. What about small house builders? You know, because most of we look around and we say we're not building enough houses. Most of that before was done by small house builders. What do the Lib Dems say about the small house builders? What can you do?
So I think for that, what we really need to be doing is we need to be, firstly, we need to upskill. We need more people working in the construction sector. Just to very quickly go back, if they're currently off sick, they need to be coming back into work. But also, of course, we need to be investing in skills and making sure that we're training people. Because I know we've had this challenge. We've committed in our manifesto to really increasing the number of houses that are being built. We've had this challenge. There simply aren't enough people currently skilled in construction, and all the different skills required in the construction industry to meet that target. So that's got to be the number one. We've got to invest in people. We've got to fix the NHS, as I said, but we have also got to invest in skills. And those, I think, are the two big challenges.
Thank you, Jonathan.
How long have you got on this one? I mean, look, well, my friends here said, look, capacity is an issue, right? But this is fundamentally a question of political will, right? So we need to build a lot more houses in the UK. There is no way to avoid that question. Under Labour, there will be targets for local areas. There will be local plans. Of course, Kevin, local areas should decide where those houses go, but they shouldn't decide whether houses are built or not, which is currently what happens after your backbenchers did that rebellion. On things like nationally significant infrastructure projects, that will be consistent with our industrial strategy. That planning process will be expedited in order to deliver the kind of infrastructure we need to succeed as an economy. We will merge some of the functions of the National Infrastructure Commission with the Independent Projects Authority, and again make that part of the industrial strategy to provide that consistency going through and delivering on it. And on things like grid connections, look, you cannot have a situation. We will simply not hit net zero if you have to wait decades for not just big energy infrastructure, but actually the kind of infrastructure that means a pub can decarbonise its heating system. This is an area, getting Britain building again, that genuinely requires a focus from the next government. I honestly believe the only way this can be fixed is with a change of government, because the respective coalition that might be in the main electing Conservative MPs is not willing at times to hear this argument. But I would just say on this argument that somehow getting Britain building is somehow taking away a local say, right? I represent and I live in the edge of Greater Manchester, where Derbyshire begins. I say to people, have you ever been in a traffic jam driving from Sheffield to Manchester? And most people immediately know where I represent. The Department of Transport, yeah, exactly right. The Department of Transport sent planning inspectors to my town in Hyde in 1965, and we might next month finally start building the bit of infrastructure we are talking about.
I think
we've got to do better than that. We've got to do better than that.
We're going to go to the floor.
Well, just in terms of the rate of house building, we should acknowledge, I think, Johnny, the period up till 2021, we were three highest levels of house building for 30 years, over around 210,000 houses being built. Can I touch on the point about SME house builders? I think it's such an important point. I think it's only about 2 decades ago, SMEs were building over 40% of all homes. Today, it's around 10% of all homes. And access to land is one thing, access to finance is the other. The doors are virtually closed with a normal banking relationship with big banks to SME house builders. That's one of the nuts we've got to crack. Regional mutual CDFIs are also a good source of finance, but that is something we must make sure SMEs can access finance.
Emma's going to the floor, but it's an interesting point because there's hundreds of people died in across the UK. The most common comment is about access to finance, how they struggle to get access to finance.
We're going to go to the floor. Rosina Robson? Yes, please do stand and share your question with us. A microphone is coming to you. Well, Rosina submitted her question. So Rosina, please share your question.
Yes, thank you. Rosina Robson from the National Hair and Beauty Federation. With affordability of apprentices, particularly a big issue for small and micro businesses, micro business employers, what will your party do to support employers to take on apprentices? Thank you.
And Johnny, do you want to start with that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rosina, for your question. Look, I think we've got to start off by saying that will not work for your members unless the overall system is working in a much better way. I thought the apprenticeship levy when it came in was a really interesting policy, but the fact is apprenticeships have declined since it came in. Now, that's not a sign of success, to put it bluntly. We will reform the levy for the economy as a whole. We'll allow more flexibility so people can put their levy funds into some other forms of trading up to half their levy funds. For smaller businesses who don't pay the levy, we'll protect their funds and entitlement. But I don't think you will be able to access the kind of apprenticeships that you need for your sector unless you've got a system where the levy is working better for the economy as a whole, and therefore colleges are providing what is required. We also have a policy around FE, which we would like to see the creation of some FE colleges becoming technical excellence colleges. They'd be exactly the kind of institutions that would be there to provide on the ground the courses that your members would need within an overall system that is working much better for businesses, whether they're large or small.
Sarah.
Thank you. So I'm a big fan of your sector, as you might expect, but I mean, not least because it provides such great opportunities for people to start up their own businesses. And again, particularly women, particularly those from ethnic minority backgrounds, and they make a massive contribution to our high street economy, which is so important to so many of our communities. So I really want to see your sector supported, and you've raised about the apprenticeship levy. We want to completely reform what's there at the moment. We want to replace it with a skills and training levy that doesn't have all the bureaucratic restrictions of the current system, that gives employers much greater flexibility in terms of the sorts of courses that they can access at FE colleges, that gives them a much wider group of people that they can recruit from and use the apprenticeship system to really add value to their businesses, as well as bring on that next generation of obviously workers in your sector, but for every sector. Because at the moment, I think too many young people are being dissuaded from choosing apprenticeships as a route, and that's something we've really got to address. But by making it more attractive to employers, by removing some of these barriers, I think that's something that we can really make a change.
And Kevin, just before we speak, I see we've got a couple of big companies in the audience. Lovely to see Cisco and Vodafone are here. I know there's a commitment from big companies to pass more of the levy to their SMEs. So again, just any thoughts on that would be helpful.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, Rosina, it's probably fair to say I'm not one of your best customers, but I'm very much of the view, and I do chair the Hair and Beauty Council, which it's a pleasure to do, and we've talked about these issues before. And the default position from my perspective, from a business perspective, is the government should try and avoid intervening and telling businesses how to train its people. So I've got some sympathy with Johnny's argument in terms of making this more of an all-skills levy. However, one of the big things, and this brings back to your point, Emma, is the key thing about the apprenticeship levy is the transfer from big companies, Cisco, Vodafone, to smaller companies. 50% of that can be sent into the supply chain, funds sent back to the Treasury, go to SMEs. That's how your apprentices are funded, because you get them free. Big businesses have to pay for their own. So what I'm not quite sure from Johnny, I think he said we're going to protect that funding. I don't think that's in your manifesto, Johnny. I may be wrong, but that's around over £1 billion a year. So anybody who wants to make this an all-skills levy will mean those SMEs no longer get free apprentices, because their money will not be transferred from those big companies to smaller companies. That's the problem. One of the solutions we've discussed on that council work is actually lots of people in your sector now are specialising rather than being more generalists of previous years. And it must be the case, we've discussed it, that shorter courses within the hair and beauty sector might be something that could deliver and help you in terms of your access to labour problem, which I know is pretty profound right now.
I don't think we've got time for Johnny to do a response on that. We're going to Tina's next question.
Yeah,
but maybe that's
fair.
something
We
we can pick up.
We are fair. It's interesting when we talk about parity of esteem between, for example, we all know academia is a good thing, but it's interesting that young people who decide to go the academic route can get 40, 50, 60,000 in student loans. If you decide to be an entrepreneur in this country at age 18, you will struggle to get finance. You might get a couple of grand down the credit union, but you're probably not getting it from your banks. You might be, but our surveys tell us maybe not. So when we talk about how we encourage entrepreneurship in our schools, in our ecosystem, in our towns, what is it that you can do? And be specific if you can be. How do we get that parity of esteem up there? That entrepreneurship is good, business is good, it's not a bad thing, and actually it creates good in the community. We saw that through COVID. We see the contributions made by small businesses. Small businesses are the people that are more likely to hire those that are furthest away from the labour market. So, they are the ones out there helping their local communities. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. How do we get that parity of esteem right for people to choose setting up a business?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, in many ways, this is the golden age of business. When I started my business, it was on a cold, freezy, rainy market stall. It wasn't a very pleasant place to be. Now you can start it from the comfort of your bedroom or your living room, and this afternoon start selling stuff. So what an opportunity for people.
In your mum's house, because you're up in the bedroom because you can't buy a house.
I know. There's so many stories. I started a window cleaner, actually.
Sorry.
Anyway, so what an opportunity for young people. We need to make sure they understand the opportunities. And people can start side hustles. That's another part of this, of course. My mind is not a vessel to be filled, it's a fire to be lighted. When good entrepreneurs go into our schools talking about this stuff. So sign up, you entrepreneurs out there at home and in the audience, something called Founders for Schools. Sherry Kutu set this up. It's real entrepreneurs actually going in to talk to primary school students about the opportunities entrepreneurship can bring. We want to really build on that in terms of getting the message out there. You can start a business tomorrow. But in that couple of grand you were talking about, one thing that we put together as well, which is really important, already lent £1 billion to startup companies, the Startup Loans Company. And it is a fantastic evolution. It doesn't require a personal guarantee. You've got to pay their money back if you blow it. But nevertheless, it doesn't need a personal guarantee. And that's creating access to finance for lots of young aspirant businesses who wouldn't otherwise have got it. One of those businesses is one called Castori. You probably know what that is. But it's now a worldwide brand who actually on the front of England's football shirts, I think. So some wonderful examples. A bit of seed finance can make a massive difference.
Jonathan, how do we get that party of esteem? How does the Labour Party, if in government, really encourage entrepreneurship?
Well, the first thing I want to say on this, Tina, is that I've grown up and represent, the classic kind of working class communities that the Labour is founded on. I don't worry so much about this because I see in my own constituency, I see from my own family, people who are now their own boss, their own small business, in a way that would never have happened in previous generations. Some of that, as Kevin said, is there are outlets to be, to get your product out there. As well as that, the kind of people who are electricians or engineers, I see that in a way, as I say, I just can't imagine my parents or their grandparents being able to do. So let's not be too negative about where we are now. But I think we've got to be unambiguously optimistic about what business delivers. I feel I try and do that every day in my job. But in terms of encouraging people, it won't be politicians. It's about, do you have good advice? And do you see good role models? And where you see that, you have the basis.
Our members don't tell us that the politicians, they need you to encourage them, but they certainly need you to ensure that you don't stop them by any of the regulation or the lack of available finance. Sarah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So on the entrepreneurial culture, I mean, just today I was at Sheen Mount Primary School. They're having their careers week and they asked me to come and talk about what it's like to be a politician. I was at pains to tell them it's not a very secure career, but I was absolutely delighted because I was talking to year 5 and year 6, and those are the top 2 years in primary school. And that is exactly the right time to be talking to young people about what they might want to do in the future. Because I think traditional careers education has really kind of come much too late. I think if you're not talking to young people until they're 15 or 16, they've already, developed an idea about the world. They might already have made the wrong choices in their GCSE options or their A-level choices or whatever it is they're going to go on to do after GCSE. You need to get them at that younger age before they go to secondary school. Let them think about, well, this is the thing that I really, really want to do. Because, and that's the other important point about the Careers Week, it's kind of like, it's going to be lots of parents or friends of the school coming in, but there'll be things that young people have never heard of before. They will have no idea. They know what their parents do. They might see a few things on telly. Typically these days, they all want to be YouTubers. It used to be, when I was young, it was pop stars and footballers, but now it's YouTubers and influencers. But they need that much broader range of inspiration from all these different people. And what are they doing? And how did you get to do that? And what's that about? And how do you spend your day? We need to get them at that younger age. But as you say, I think the inspiration we really need to deliver is, how are you living your life? How does your life satisfy you? What are you getting out of it? And then, it's much more a kind of like, right, well, maybe that's something I can spend my day doing, rather than thinking this very stovepipe way about different careers.
Yeah, be what you think.
We have 2 minutes left to go. So this final question, I need a quick fire response, but it's a question that I think Tina and I would be disappointed if we didn't get into this debate, which is about buying from small businesses, SME procurement. So the government committed to spend £1 in every 3 with small businesses. I believe that's still a commitment. I need 30 seconds from each of you down the panel. What is the one thing that you will do to buy more from small businesses? Johnny.
We will guarantee on government contracts of a certain size, there is at least one SME on the procurement shortlist for those contracts.
Sarah.
It will be about removing red tape, making access to contracts, making access to bids much, much more straightforward for SMEs.
And final words.
Yeah, the Procurement Act, we've already legislated for it. It does all those things. It's moved from requiring something to be the most economically advantageous tender. We've got rid of the E, so it was MEAT, it's now MAT, most advantageous tender, and that can be then an SME. That can be part of the bidding process. That already works within the 10-point plan. There's a further commitment that businesses in receipt of government contracts should use SMEs more than they do. Not just the British Aerospace of this world, it is also things like NHS trusts, They should, and the local authorities, they should. There's a wonderful thing by a Labour council called Preston City Council. Their model about using SMEs in their local area has transformed the economy in Preston. It's something we should roll out in other parts of the country.
Last question. What is the one idea that another party had that you actually like? Kevin. Assuming you're one of us, and I know you've run a business, but what idea does Labour or the Lib Dems have that you actually like?
Well, Johnny is actually not a Labour member, he's a Labour and cooperative member of Parliament. And the regional mutual banks thing I said before is classic cooperative from the cooperative sector. It is about organisation. Commercial banking cannot be the entire solution to banking in the UK. A regional mutual aspect of it is very, very important. It can transform the relationship between businesses and their banking, the people who provide their banking.
More development
so that
banks,
would be the one.
local regional banks. Brilliant.
Yep.
Sarah.
I think probably the full expensing that the Conservatives brought in last year. I don't think that it's not precisely our policy, but to be taking that more flexible approach, particularly during a time when companies have faced such high inflation in purchasing. I think that was a good and useful thing.
That's definitely welcome. Jonathan.
I think when there's been lots of eras of this Conservative government, but when, excuse me, Greg Clark introduced the industrial strategy, whatever criticisms I would have of it, I think we had one, people understood it, and it should have been given some proper time to have that longevity which any industrial strategy will be based upon.
Well, it's high on your agenda. I know that. Thank you all very much.
There is such a thing called co-opetition, I think, Tina, which we've just seen. Huge thank you to our political guests for joining us. As we say, at what is a busy time, I overheard a conversation between Ian and Johnny earlier, and Ian said, "What kind of hours are you doing? Is it 19 hours a day?" I think Kevin is back up to
small
the north
business.
among well, very true. We've all been there and we all do it. But huge thanks to you for coming to share your small business plans. I am sorry we didn't get to any questions from those on the live stream. I think Tina and I will get in big trouble for that. But I think, as you can tell, there are so many questions that we have for these political parties in terms of who may be the next government and making small business rules, programmes, regulations, maybe a few less of those. And so it's always difficult to get through all of it. But do stay in touch with FSB, with ICAEW, with Enterprise Nation. As you can imagine, over the next few weeks, we will still be sharing all of the updates and all of the news with you. So thank you for coming. Thank you to our political guests. I am now going to hand the stage to the amazing Malcolm Backus, who is the new president of ICAEW. Malcolm, over to you.
Thank you. There's never enough time, is there? I mean, time always seems to go far too fast in these discussions. But my job is simply to wind the evening up as quickly as possible. So it's my pleasure to thank you all for attending the event this evening, both those in person and those attending virtually. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. It was certainly very illuminating on all sides. Because hosting events like these, with this sort of opportunity to ask questions about small business policies, indeed about anything, is really the lifeblood of the democratic process. So thank you very much to the three representatives we've had here this evening to come and answer our questions. And I'd invite you to give another round of applause to thank Kevin, Jonathan and Sarah for their time this evening. A plug, of course, for my own institute here, from those of you who've never been here before, and I hope you've enjoyed looking around part of our building, at least here. You'll see a bit later. But events like this do form part of the ICAEW's contribution to the public interest, and that's one of the reasons our profession was founded with a charter. It helps to inform members and the wider business community about policy developments affecting small businesses. But we couldn't do that on our own, and this event here this evening would not have been possible without our partners at Enterprise Nation and the Federation of Small Businesses. So I'd also invite you, please, to give a round of thanks to our two questioners tonight, Emma Jones and Tina McKenzie. And finally, it's a goodbye now to the hundreds of people who are online, who've listened to us this evening and viewed the debate online. Yes, we are sorry we didn't get time to ask answer your questions as you'd like. Inevitable, I suppose. But wherever you are in the country, whatever you do to support small businesses, thank you, good night, and hope to see you at an event in future. But for those of you who are here in the hall, the event is not yet over. If you don't yet wish to go home, I would cordially invite you to join myself, our guests, in a drinks, a networking reception, which we are holding up there in the reception room. I keep having to try and work this one out. It's on your left and on my right. So up those stairs, we've got a reception now. Do stay, have a chat, talk to us all, continue to carry on this discussion about promoting small businesses going forward. Thank you very much indeed. Good night, and thank you.